Hi, welcome back to part 4 of our training course, and this time it will around section B for Windows Server 2016 what's new. A quick recap to what we have covered so far during our course and the modules. As you can see, we finished or we covered introduction, platform vision, management of Windows Server, and then the security and the first part of security. We covered that one in the previous series or previous video. For today, we will cover the second part, which is around the users and the hypervisor side of it. So the first part was around the operating system or the OS. Today will be around the user and then the hypervisor. Let's have a look at the protection of the users, or we shall call it protect credentials. So with protect credentials, we have 4 topics. We have virtualization based security, similar to the one we've seen earlier on the device guard. Here it's around credential guard and how we can enable it, deploy it, and how we can secure our credentials. And the second part will be around remote credential guard. And then we discuss the other 2 parts, which is just in time, just enough admin under the identity and access section, which will be at later series or videos, because they will cover a lot of improvement around the compute and identity. That's why we're going to park these 2 to the later stages. But for this part, for this video today, or this section, we will focus on the first 2 only. So the first 2, what we have the virtualized based security credential guard. How can I enable credential guard? LSA process talks to new component, which called and isolate LSA process, and then store it and protect the secrets, which require virtualized based security to be enabled. And the requirement, you can see them: hypervisor feature, second level address translation, secure boot, and TPM as an optional, with SSO or without SSO. With SSO, which means I'm able to use Kerberos and TLMv2 and no earlier LSA, which is supposed to disable. The second part is around remote credential guard. If you have a requirement to secure against pass the hash attack, then this is the right feature for you. You can enable it via reg settings, group policy, DSC, and so on, and most device both and utilize Kerberos authentication and help you around protection of your credential for remote desktop connection. We are aware of some issues, maybe you read online or not, around session host or RDPing onto the target, which means a lot of these attacks, they compromise the credentials when you are RDPing on the target server, so they can impersonate the credentials and steal it. So what happened here, Microsoft are working on leaving this behind and creating strings and encrypt that journey between source and target, which will prevent pass the hash attack and compromisation of their credential, which means we will challenge the token every time, every request. There is no caching, there is no single sign-on against this, as you can see on this screen. It's quite a great tool, and there is no prereq for it apart from the Kerberos and domain joint. Now that's what we had for the user level. Next is the protection of virtual machine. What we have for the hypervisor, what Microsoft introduced to secure the hypervisors. So this is the typical activity, and you can see if a host getting compromised, there's nothing will stop the guest VMs passing the infection between them. So local admin on hypervisor can access the machine, hypervisor host are targeted for hackers, and then tenant VMs are exposed and source storage and the network. So what Microsoft done around Server 2016 with Hyper-V especially is something called Host Guardian, securing the communication between the VMs and preventing these attacks passing between the VM. So virtualized based security prevents infection, host from accessing virtual memory and processor. Host Guardian service ensures VMs are running on legitimate host, leveraging measure the boot device health attestation. Now with virtual TPM, we can use it to do some encryption for the VM hard drive with BitLocker. So what we are doing here, we are isolating the request, we are challenging the request, and you have to define, show me who you are with your ticket before you communicate. Now, what do I need to do with measure the boot? I need a VPS requirement to pass, I need TPM. If you recall earlier, VPS is a PowerShell script you run it to make sure device guard or credential guard are fine, and then you can move on. With benefits, TPM store the current device state and cryptography signs, and will audit the logs, and this used with the remote station, which is covered next basically. And this is a similar requirement like the previous one, and give me sort of like a health check, and does integrate with MDM and host guardian to shield the machines and to make sure they are compliant with our requirement. If out of compliance, it can block the access to this network and prevent it from accessing our environment, and then it's shifted to quarantine to take action against it. This is how it looks like for us. For a host guardian machine protected, you can see the device health policy surface. It validate the host, and it does require two validation to make sure either in or out based on the requirement you predefined. I can use admin option, or I can use TPM. With admin it will be AD based, with TPM it will be trusted platform based. Now the first one is around admin. What can I do with admin? Again, I need to create the groups in advance, I need to create the memberships, and I need to verify the host guardian cluster for the group membership, plus passing the VPS requirement or the PowerShell we spoke about earlier. And they support both generation 1 and generation 2 for 2012, R2, and 2016. You can see the benefit. Only hosts that you are designated as a guard host can decrypt and start shield the VMs. You can designate hosts as a guarded by placing them into security group that you create in AD domain services. A trust relationship must be set up with the fabric AD and the host guardian service forest. The second part is around TPM. Requirements similar to the previous one, but in addition I will require TPM v2, and I will require hypervisor code integrity, which means my BIOS, my chips are up to speed with the latest updates, and I will require UEFI secure boot as well. Support generation 2 known legacy, and this applies to 2012 and 2016. Benefit: only hosts that you have designated as a guarded host can start shielded VMs. The technologies that ensure that the hosts are running trusted code are built into the Windows Server operating system, which includes secure measured boot and code integrity policy. Now, the last part is around virtual machine hard disk encryption requirement. VPS again passing, virtual TPM if required, and support generation 2. BitLocker, a benefit for BitLocker to encrypt utilizing AES as a standard to encrypt the entire volume on Windows Server and client machines, and can be utilized to encrypt Hyper-V as well when added a virtual TPM. Enhancement supporting XTS, AES as an encryption technology, plus the TPM virtualized support in Hyper-V. Now, we mentioned that so far, this is what I had for you around security for the hypervisor itself. This we have a quick recap to what we have learned so far for part 1 or part 2, and now only part 2. With part 2 we spoke about security around securing the users and the hypervisor. Part 1 was around the machine itself or the OS itself. Now with securing the we said the credential guard, we spoke about virtualized based security hyphen credential guard, how we can enable it, and the requirement and the benefit of it, and how we can run the VPS to make sure we meet the requirements. And the second part was around securing the RDS session, making sure the protect or encrypt the RDP sessions and prevent the pass the hash attack by utilizing Kerberos with AD to make sure both are domain joined and using Kerberos, and I can use PowerShell or reg settings or group policy to implement it. Now that was around the user. The second part was around the hypervisor. We spoke about how we can using host guardian with TPM or without TPM to isolate, protect the machine from getting compromised around processor and RAM, and how we can challenge the request, how we can apply the request, and how we can basically benefit from generation 1 and generation 2. And the last part we spoke about the virtual machine VHD disk encryption. We mentioned the BitLocker, how we can utilize BitLocker to encrypt the machine. In relation to BitLocker, similar to the TPMs, we have to have a tool to manage it. Out of the box, everything will get reported to AD for the users, and especially around even device registration. So if you are subscribing to Microsoft what they call enterprise desktop or MOP Then you will have something called mbam, which will help you around, managing the BitLocker through sort of central management, doing self-service, and some other benefit as well, like network unlocking, plus the advanced group policy. If not, then you basically have you can use maybe group policy or other method to manage them. That's all for what I had for you for part two of our what I call it series. And the final part is what we covered around security for our Windows Server 2016. What's new? We covered device guard, credential guard, and how we can implement host guardian with TPM, without TPM, or with virtual TPMs. And then we spoke about code integrity, control flow guard, and virtualized base security and defender. And we mentioned how we can secure our environment against major attacks or vulnerabilities, and how we can prevent, maybe, like with the last part we mentioned the encryption of the VHD for the entire volume. This is not only against attack, but it could be against, like an admin taking a VHD or VMDK or other images and attach it outside of our, you know, hypervisor. What happened next? We need to be able to encrypt it. So as an admin, we keep hearing the news. An admin took a VHD and sold an information belong to the company. So if I have no encryption, this is what happened. If I've got encryption, the encryption need to be managed not by the same admin, because they will see the same code, they will have the same bypass keys. It need to be managed by different team or the security team if we can, because they are in charge of all the security certificate keys, either using HSM, hardware security model, which is the preferable method rather than using AD. Whatever method we use, we have to make sure domain admin, enterprise admin, they cannot see this. We have to segregate, isolate, silo all of these responsibility from each other to make sure we are secured. Also, if somebody taking one of these VHDs or disk, they cannot attach it and boot up with it. As you are aware, we can, if there's no security, if there's no encryption, I can just attach it to my laptop, either using Hyper-V on it, or it could be VMware Workstation or Oracle or whatever virtual platforms, and I can read it by having some encryption, which means I can specify it cannot be, basically, as soon as you take it out, it cannot be read. You can do like wiping, and or you can destroy it, and you have, depending on what tool you are using. BitLocker to help you around just encryption, so you can take it, which means you will need that code to operate to unlock it. And if you are using mbam, then you can basically specify not to be unlocked unless using the same sort of policy or the same hypervisor. Again, this is what I had for you for today. Hopefully you have basically learned something useful, and next series will be around identity, AD, and we'll cover more details around security. And the last part, if you want to make sure your hypervisors they meet the requirement, then you will need to remember to run that PowerShell script, which is the readiness tool, to make sure your device guard meet the requirement and you can enable it. And to enable it, you can do it via PowerShell or via group policy. Same thing applies to the credential guard and the rest. Hopefully you've learned something useful, and thank you very much for watching. I shall see you at the later videos, and that's all for today. Thank you. Goodbye.